Welcome to the show, folks. This is Wrestling Changed My Life. Here we go.
I was a pretty rotten student by all accounts. So when I got to college, my first quarter and first semester, I got, what did I get? I got a 2.5, right? And then so my second one, I got a 2.5. And then my third quarter, I actually got a 3.0. And I'm like, you know what? I think if I try, I could do whatever I want.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if they gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast. This is your host, Ryan Warner. I've been gone for a week on vacation exploring New England. I think we went to Vermont, Rhode Island, had a great time. But I will say last week was the first week in a long time that I haven't released 2 episodes. So please forgive, but I can promise you we're back and ready to finish out the year. My guest today is Dr. Mike Mattin, who has 4 sons that all wrestle, 2 of which wrestle at the University of Michigan, Drew and Cole. They have quite the dynasty going on out in Delta, Ohio. The Mattin family does. But this interview is actually about Mike's career and how he got from being a one-time state champ who didn't think he was smart enough to be a doctor to now being the medical director at Toledo Hospital. Really inspiring story. I think you'll enjoy it. Before we get to it, Fan of the Week goes to D. Mays 2001. He left a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast app saying, love this podcast. So D. Mays, thank you very much, brother. I appreciate it. And for all those who are listening, please leave a rating if you're listening on Apple Podcast. And that's it. Let's give it up for Dr. Mike Mattin. Peace. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here with Dr. Mattin, Dr. Mike Mattin. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Ryan?
Doing great. Thank you for taking the time. I know you. We've had some conversations and emails offline, but you're on the front lines of this thing. Before we get into wrestling and your boys and your background, why don't you just let everyone know what your day job is and kind of how you're experiencing this whole thing.
Sure. I'm an emergency room physician. I'm the medical director at Toledo Hospital Emergency Department. It's a 95,000 volume ER, a level 1 trauma center in Toledo, Ohio. And so I work in the ER, half-time clinically and half-time administratively.
How much have you seen a change just since this corona outbreak has happened in the past 6 weeks? Have you seen a lot of uptick?
Yeah, it's been a drastic change in the emergency department in the hospital overall. You know, the emergency department volume, which would surprise most people, is actually down significantly. It's down over 50% overall. But that is when the stay-at-home order started going into effect, the emergency department volume went down. And then we started gradually seeing more and more patients present with symptoms that were consistent with corona. And it's definitely been ramping up daily, unfortunately.
You're still seeing an uptick in corona cases.
So. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they think we're going to peak in this area of anywhere from next week to the next couple of weeks is when they're anticipating us peaking in Northwest Ohio.
And this is a dumb question, but what's to prevent this from coming back next winter, assuming we get through it this summer here?
I fully anticipate it to be around a while, you know, until enough people get immunity to it, it will be around. So, yeah, I think that's a very real question.
man, it's like, whew. And this whole conversation will not be all about this, but it's just the state of the world right now. And, I'm enjoying some time at home because I'm an outside technology sales rep, so I can work remote, and I don't know anyone who's lost a job or anyone who's been sick, so we got it good. But, it's just kind of crazy to think about. When's the next time we're going to be able to go out to eat and not feel weird about it,
No, exactly. I was watching some shows on Netflix at home, and you kind of see you're like, oh, they're not social distancing, right? And you're judging it like you are now. So that's a big unknown, right? I can't wait to go out and hang out with my friends, and go to a wrestling tournament or go hang out and just do what I want to do, rather than always worried about being by yourself or only with the ones you live with.
Right. Well, and the reason you're here is that wrestling has played such a vital role in your life, and I can't wait to get into it. I think it's just so interesting how you initially did not want to go pre-med because of some self-imposed beliefs, I guess is the best way to put it, but you persevered on through. But before we get to that, let's just start at the origin story. You were a 103-pound state champ for Delta back in, I saw one report that said 89. I thought it was 90, but...
89. I won it my junior year and took third my senior year. So yeah, I won it in 89.
Okay. So take us back to the origin story. How did you get involved, and why did it hook you?
Yeah, as a common theme, my dad was into wrestling. He wrestled in high school, self-admitted not very good, but enjoyed it, and then kind of got me involved at a young age. And our high school really we never had a good team. We had one state placer, I think, before 1988 ever. And then gradually had a group of kids that kind of my age that got into it. And and that's kind of how it started. So I got hooked at a young age and was all in, so to speak. And that culminated with a high school team and individual title, I think, my junior year.
I was never on teams that were decent enough to win, but I can imagine winning a team title. That's got to be pretty cool.
No, that's great. Kids don't realize how fun that is. And it, obviously wrestling's an individual sport, but to win it as a team is something truly special and something that you can share with your teammates the rest of your life. So it's much more fun to have a good team than just be good at an individual level.
And how does Ohio decide the team state title? Duels or tournament?
Most people would say that the tournament would be the primary one. I'd say 15 years ago, the Coaches Association started putting on a dual state title, and then officially the state took it over. And so they issue 2 state titles a year per division. So there's 3 divisions. So there's the individual state title and where they can keep team points, as well as the dual state title. So, but I think most people would rather win the individual one. It feels like that's the more prestigious one.
It seems that way. It's funny, in Illinois, I grew up in Illinois and I live in Chicago now, but we only have the team dual champion. We don't even keep score at the individual tournament. It's one of the only places I know that does that, but I always just wonder how different states do it, because this year, as there is every season, there's always a discussion of what should decide the national team title, the individual tournament or the dual tournament. So always fun to see what other states are doing.
Exactly.
So was Alan Freed already through the system by the time you were there?
No, so I graduated in 90 and Alan graduated, I believe, in 88, right? So he, Alan Freed was like the first guy that I knew that was a legend, right? And he's only a few years older than me, but everybody knew Alan Freed. He was the man, unbeatable, we thought. So when you're from Ohio, no one thought anyone was better than him.
I love Alan Freed, and I love hearing stories about him. And to your point, he was like the first of that era, I guess, where it's like, this is the best high school wrestler ever. Then they said it was Kolat, and then they said it was Damian Hahn. But, I've heard of stories about Alan Freed just because I'm a big Hawkeye fan, and obviously he had some battles with brands. And once I had a chance to sit down with Alan, it was just unreal how cool he is and how open he is about all of the rivalries and, some of the stuff that was going on at Okie State at the time. But, just from what you can remember, was he just freaking lights out even back then?
He was unbelievable. Yeah, everybody wanted to wrestle like him. Everyone wanted to be like him. It's weird how he had like a aura about him. And fast forward, 20 some years, and I saw him back in the area coaching at the youth level, and I was like, man, that's Alan Freed, And so it brought back all those memories of like everybody knew him. And so I remember he bumped up, I think, 2 weight classes. He lost to, what was it, Billman? I think in a duel with Northampton or Easton or one of those back in the day. So, and he lost, and we were like, no way, how could he lose? So
there's that great video of him taking down John Smith at the 88 trials. And the announcer is like, I didn't know who he was, but he's this Ohio sports legend. If you listen to it on YouTube, I'm sure you would know him right away since you're an Ohio guy, but it was just,
Bob Prusay.
What is it?
Probably Bob Prusay.
Yes, that's it. Oh my God, that guy's such a character. I could listen to him for hours. Is he still with us?
Yeah, he's with us. He used to do the Brakeman report, or Brian Brakeman, maybe it was, instead of Prusay. So I don't know. It was one of those two. So,
okay.
But yeah. So
it's just such a coincidence. We're talking today because I know you're big in the Ohio scene, and we're going to get to it. But I didn't realize that when the Walsh Jesuit team came around in the 90s, that they were kind of like the bad boys of Ohio wrestling. And this is probably when you were away in med school, so maybe you don't remember it as much. But I didn't realize that Walsh Jesuit and St. Ed's had this bitter rivalry, and that it was like kind of like the Catholics versus convicts type of thing. Were you around during that time? Or were you in med school and not really into it?
No, I was around actually, and when I was in undergrad, after my 3rd year, I actually coached all throughout the rest of my undergrad, as well as med school and residency. So I was an assistant high school coach. So I was right there for all those, watching Walsh and St. Ed's battle. They had some amazing teams.
What was it with the Walsh teams that everyone says gave them the bad boy look and feel? Or was that just internet stuff?
Well,
now?
Bill Barger was a great coach, right? But he kind of was, kind of a little bit rougher character, and was loud and stuff. And the team took on that personality, and they were phenomenal wrestlers, no doubt. They were so good. Malika and Heskett and Marchetti and Nupp. And I mean, you could just go on and on. They produced some amazing talent.
I'm trying to get a video of Sonny Marchetti wrestling because everybody I talked to who had any encounter with him says he was unbelievable as well. I mean, that's the great thing about wrestling. Everyone says that guy's awesome, but he's another one where you're like, that guy was just a man-child in his day.
For a funny story, so Sonny was a freshman, and we had a good kid who was a junior, and it was the first tournament of the year, and I knew Sonny was. I mean, I'd seen him in the youth level, and I knew he was lights out. And I told our kid, I said, "Hey, this kid's just a freshman. Go out there. His first match of the year." And he originally went to North Canton Hoover, was not at Walsh, and so we wrestled him, and our kid ended up getting tech like 15-1 or 16-1 or something like in the second period, and he came off the mat and he said, "Coach, you were lying to me. That kid's really good." And I said, "Yeah. You remember his name? He's going to be special." And he was very tough.
Man. And so,
explosive.
Is that right? Big guy or little guy?
Yeah, little guy. Probably about a 30-pounder as a freshman or so. He was just so built like a spark plug and just real explosive, and just had just a powerful kid. And Bill, he was a man when he was a freshman.
He went to Lassen Junior College, right?
Right.
So I just had TJ Williams on this morning. He was at Lassen during that same time, maybe a little bit after, but like Jameel Kelly was there, and I go, people forget about the JUCO scene once in a while. Like you can't overlook those guys at all.
Oh gosh, no, not at all.
And so this whole era that we're talking about, we kind of side tangent on. Sorry about that. This is right when you had a really interesting moment in your career, and of the email you sent me, I thought about this line for literally about a week. I just couldn't get out of my head that after you got to Toledo, you ended up not wrestling all the way through. You were coaching, like you said, but you quietly switched your major to pre-med, and you didn't tell anyone because you were convinced that you weren't smart enough to get in. That is just so fascinating to me, because obviously they were wrong. But first of all, how did you even get a bug up your butt to like do pre-med?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird, I was never in high school. I had a little bit atypical academic background. I graduated high school with a 2.51, to be honest with you. So, and the only reason it was a 2.51 is because my parents said I needed a 2.5 to be into sports. So my mom's a nurse and my dad was an atypical student. He went back and became a dentist when I was in junior high. And so I was a pretty rotten student by all accounts. So when got to college, my first quarter and first semester, I got, what did I get? I got a 2.5, right? And then so my second one, I got a 2.5, and then my third quarter, I actually got a 3.0, and I'm like, you know what? I think if I try, I could do whatever I want. And so I had always wanted to go to med school. I just didn't think I had the drive or just didn't think I could quite get it done. So my sophomore year, I didn't tell my girlfriend, who's now my wife now. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anybody. I just switched my major to biology and pre-med. And, I did well the first semester or quarter. And I finally told them, and I think I just didn't tell people because, when you don't tell people your goal, then if you don't reach it, you didn't really risk much. Right. And so I think telling people, talking about it, writing it down, that's, for me and I think for most people is a big stepping stone. If you tell somebody it's important, suddenly everybody knows it's important to you. And if, you're putting something on the line. So yeah, I didn't tell anybody. So just did it.
So the 2.5 in high school, you must have were you not trying, or were you trying and just kind of told yourself you weren't smart?
No, I didn't try at all. So I literally did as little as I possibly could, and I'm definitely not proud of it. but, looking back, but it was what it was. And once I switched my major, I was all in, and I never got less than an A after I switched my major again. So
isn't that amazing what the human body's capable of and the human mind? Like if you tell yourself something, you create a new standard for yourself, and that's what you did.
Yeah. Yep.
God,
I just went all in.
That's awesome. And so once you were kind of all in, you were pre-med and you were applying for med school, did those first couple of semesters of poor GPA hinder your chances of getting to a good med school?
Yeah, yes, I would say that, like I said, when I switched, I never got less than an A, but my overall GPA was like a 3.4. And, I took the MCAT and did okay. I took it without physics, which is a big part of it. But I wanted to graduate in 4 years and I was behind, obviously, because I was a year and a half in education. So I had to cram everything in the summer and things like that. So yeah, I applied to 30 schools, only got 2 interviews. And I got 2 interviews. I got put on the waiting list at both of them, and I got in 10 days before med school started. So 10 days before school started.
What were you thinking?
Didn't even have a background.
What were you thinking you were going to do up until day 10 before med school?
I had no plans. I didn't interview. I didn't apply to grad school. I had no plans. I have no idea why I didn't do anything. I guess I just believed I somehow would work out, and thankfully it did.
Man, that's just a lot of belief in yourself and just conviction to go all in on that.
or stupidity, I'm not sure, but it worked out for the best.
Wow. And as you're going through this, do you have the support of your friends and family, or is there some doubters amongst them even?
No, my friends and my family were great. My girlfriend, which is my wife now, she was awesome. My parents were very supportive, and so yeah, it was no big deal. Just they were supportive and did whatever I asked of them.
Business as usual once you were in. Now, you're obviously a super high level coach. You wrestled at a high level. How difficult was the transition to med school for you?
Med school? No, it wasn't that bad, actually. It's kind of funny. You talk your podcast, right? Wrestling changed your life. Wrestling truly changed my life. And I viewed, this may sound a little corny, but I viewed med school like a wrestling match or a goal, right? And so that was like my state title or what. And I just wanted to outwork everybody. And I figured if I outworked everybody, I'm going to be successful. And so I kind of approached it with that same mentality that each test was a match, and I needed to win the match, and winning the match was getting an A or getting an honors or whatever I wanted to get. So I just kind of did that mindset, and that seemed to work for me. And it's just put a lot of time in, and just hours and hours and hours. And my wife and I, we all sacrificed, and it, yeah.
Worked out in the end, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
Here you are, leading, I guess, would you say you're leading the ER department? Is that the right way to put it?
Well, I don't think I'm leading. I'm one of the, obviously it's just like a wrestling team, right? You have a whole team of people, and the ER is like a wrestling team in the sense that we have to work really close. So I'm definitely one of the team members that are there, and being the medical director, you get a little more influence on how things go. But we have a great group that I'm fortunate enough to work with.
I mean, the ER seems like a place where if you're an adrenaline, maybe not an adrenaline junkie, but most wrestlers enjoy adrenaline. I mean, that has to be that environment. I mean, I can't imagine the things you guys see day in and day out in the ER.
Yeah, for the most part, it's the routine, right? But you definitely never know what's going to come in, and it definitely, the things that I've seen over the last 20 years, anything can come in, and anything does come in.
Now, did you stay coaching throughout your med school and residency?
I did. I stayed coaching, and then my first year out, I had a real job, and my wife's like, "Okay, listen, you have to stop. You have boys now, and you can coach them, but you need to get a real job and get working and paying back your student loans." So yeah, I coached through med school, all med school, and all the residency.
I don't know how you did that, because people I talked to, my girlfriend is she's about to graduate Northwestern with her physician assistant degree. And that's only a 2-year program, but I mean, I've started to bump elbows with a couple of her friends who are in medical school, and like their workload just seems ridiculous. And when they're on residency, they're going sometimes days without sleeping. So I don't know how the heck you kept coaching all the way through that.
Yeah, at the time I didn't really think much of it. I just loved it so much, right? And I had the head coach was, my coach in high school, and was a big mentor of mine. And so Robin Rayfield. And so I just enjoyed it so much and loved watching the kids have success. And we had some great teams. And so it was worth the sacrifice to me. And my wife loved it. So she was all in there and watching it. And so it was good.
That's amazing that it was. So you were still coaching at the same high school you'd wrestle at all those years later,
yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
And that's where your kids went now, or some of them still go?
Yes. 2 graduated from there. My third son, Zach's a junior, and then I have a little guy who's a 7th grader in town. Man. At Delta High School.
And so what's amazing to me is your involvement as a coach is like nothing I've ever seen. Some of these camps you hold are just massive. So, one of the ones I'm most interested in is this hammer camp that you host. When you say you have it at your house, do you literally have a big facility with multiple mats, or how does that work?
No,
and what is the camp?
Right. So it's kind of, just a little background on that hammer camp. It's turned out to be just an amazing experience. So we were out at Fargo and was talking with Jared Lawrence from Pinnacle, and John Strittmatter, and then Eric Burnett from Burnett Trained, and Mike Kolzicki from Wrestling Factory. And we're like, man, we should get together and train for Super 32. And so everyone thought it was a great idea. And they're like, well, where should we have it? And so I was like, well, I'm kind of in the middle, I can hold it at our high school. So that's kind of how it started out. So that Delta hosted it. And then we just, at my house, Pinnacle and Young Guns. And then the first year, Askren Wrestling Academy, they came out as well. So they just stay at the house. So they don't, because we don't want it to cost anything. We don't want to make any money off of it. We just want to train with great kids. And so we do it on as cheap as we can. And like I said, I have a saint for a wife who lets all those kids stay at the house here. So,
man, just to put it lightly, she's saintly for sure. I mean, that's a lot of boys coming in and out. But I mean, like you said, you have 4 sons. 2 are at Michigan now. One's in high school. One's in middle school. Multiple state titles throughout the family. Drew won 3, Cole won 1, Zach has won 1, and was a junior this year. And obviously his state got canceled, and your youngest is in middle school. So your boys have had a tremendous level of success. If you think back to how you started with them and how you're doing it now, would you say you were their coach, or did you hire other people to be their coach throughout the process?
Great question. I would say that a little bit of both. I would say at the youth level, I ran the youth program in Delta, which is, again, it's a town of 3,000. It's we had like 100 kids in the program. So we would have our community-based program that they would always go to. And then I would, for me, I always wanted to put my kids around people that were great off the mat and great on the mat, equally as important. So I always tried to find one or two or three people that I really enjoyed getting them around. And so that's kind of what I did. So I coached them during the week, and then maybe one day a week, or in the summer, if we, they do go to camps at other places, and whether it be Pinnacle or they go to Young Guns or Burnett trained locally, there's a place in Foxfire. So I would just have a small group of people that we would farm them out.
Got it. And it's always interesting to hear that. I mean, there's no one way to do it, but I had Yanni on last week, and that I was thinking about that for a while, because him and his dad are very unique in how close they are and how intertwined they are. But then you think back to some of the guys in your generation, I don't think that was the case as much. And what I mean by that is like Doug Schwag, for example, his parents weren't involved at all. And like Mark Ironside, they weren't really involved. But you look at the top guys now, the Spencer Lees, the Dayton Fix, the Yannis, all of them had like these dads that were not only involved, but like personal trainers to these kids. And it's just, you think, is it possible to succeed in a world without that? Are there any top level guys that aren't doing that now? Then you and your kids seem to be somewhere in the middle. I mean, you're definitely involved in helping them, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of ways to skin that cat, right? For me, I just wanted to open as many doors as I could for my children. And if they wanted to walk through it, then they did, right? And so for me, and I had like my wife was super supportive when they were young, which is what's necessary. I think you need a mom that's super supportive of it, because it's a hard sport, right? And so then once they started getting about a level that I thought that they could compete, across the country, that's when I made sure I started getting them around coaches that could help take them to the next level, because I'm far from an elite coach. I just, like I said, I know what I think works for my boys and what works for kids to an X level. And then I think it's important to go get people that are better and just, have proven success. And like I said, that are great off the mat as well. And so that's why I always tried to surround them with that. And it seems to work out pretty well for my boys.
Well, it's no surprise you chose Michigan, because Sean Bourmet, one of the, I won't say icons, I guess, of Illinois. I mean, what he did with Team Overtime back in the heyday was unbelievable, and he was a legend to everyone in Illinois, especially the Chicago area. What went into the decision to go to Michigan? I know it wasn't your decision, but you certainly had some influence. How did that all come about for your kids?
It's actually kind of a funny story. So our family grew up huge Buckeye fans, Actually, one of the first camps I ever did have at my house was I called Tom Ryan, and he came and spent the weekend at our house doing a camp for like our kids, and like 20 kids in our club. And so grew up huge. And it came time when Drew was like I think his freshman year, I was like, man, I need to get him to an RTC. And so I didn't even know Michigan had an RTC. I didn't even know it. So I was going to drive him 2 hours and 45 minutes down to Columbus twice a week. And I just was like, man, I don't know if I can justify that. And my wife's like, you're nuts. You're not doing that. And so I go, man, maybe Michigan's got an RTC. And so I looked online. They had a program. And so for the high school kids, so I signed up. Drew's like, I don't want to go. It's not going to be any good. So we go up there, and it blew us all away. I loved it because I was so impressed with the coaching staff immediately. I had not met Sean or Josh or Kellen before that. And I was just so impressed how they handled the room and how they delivered their message. And it wasn't out of fear and intimidation. It was, you could tell that they cared about their guys. And, and then Drew loved it because he was drilling every day with Connor Utzi, who's, was a two-time All-American, or was at that time, or one time at that time, or just finished his second one. And every day, twice a week, he was wrestling with him. And before you know it, it was, they were at leading the race for they ended up liking Drew. He liked them. I was super excited when he made that choice. And I think it came down to Minnesota, and Michigan were the final two.
So what's your connection with Lawrence and Pinnacle in Minnesota?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. So Drew was 12 and Cole was 10. And I get a call from a kid named Riley. Oh, gosh, I'm losing my mind. I'm going to be embarrassed here. I can't remember. One of the Pinnacle boys. And Drew used to wrestle. And the dad called me and said, hey, they're having a camp up at their cottage. Would you send the boys out? And I'm like, okay. So I didn't know Jared at all. And I sent him up. I put them on an airplane. They were 12 and 10, flew them to Minneapolis by themselves. And someone picked him up and they took him up to the cottage. And it was like 12 kids. And they had this like camp, which was like on the water. So they played half the day and wrestled half the day. And then they flew back on their own. And then so Jared and I just got to know each other after that. And then Brandon. And so we just got along great and started hanging out. And then when we do the Hammer Camp, so I'm fortunate enough to get to see them every year. And obviously out at Fargo and Super 32 and all the big events. So yeah, that's it happened because of a dad inviting them to a camp up at a lake. So,
man, how crazy are wrestling parents?
I know it. My wife, yes, again, she's a saint. She let that happen. So, 12 and 10, put them on the plane and sent them on their way. So
I got to know. So is you and your wife, are you high school sweethearts? Or did you meet after high school?
Well, like I said, wrestling can't, changed my life. So I was at a wrestling tournament. We had known each other a little bit, and I was at a wrestling tournament in college, and she was in high school. And she went to the wrestling tournament to talk to some other guy. And that night, I talked to her a little bit there. And that night, she called me up and asked me out. And that was back in, so I was a freshman in college, and she was in high school at a neighboring school. And we got together and pretty much that was the rest of it. So we got married in 96.
So at least she was around a wrestling event, so she knew this was going to be part of your life the whole time going through.
I was very open with her. When we first started dating, it was obviously pretty obvious that it was important to me, but we had talks and I told her, a few things. I said, just so a couple things. Number one is, my family's always most important to me. Number two, my work will be important to me. And number three, wrestling is very important to me. And I need to know where you feel about that. And she didn't hesitate. She loved it. And, when I was coaching, she got to love all those kids that we coached. And then, so we were actually, when we were engaged, we were sitting in the high school state tournament watching the finals, and they were honoring the families of wrestling in Ohio. So the Slaters, the Jordans, the Milkoviches, the Sabados. And I turned over to her and I said, hey, all I want out of you is 4 boys. You give me 4 boys, I'll give you anything you want. And so, we fast forward 15 years and I get 4 boys. So she's still waiting for that car I promised her. So maybe someday.
That's awesome. I mean, it's a sport unlike any other. I mean, but then when you think when you think that some of the sacrifices are unique to wrestling, I know some families who their daughters were elite soccer players. Actually, a lot of wrestlers I used to coach where they had sisters, they were elite soccer players. And that is a whole other thing where they'll completely skip high school altogether to do soccer. I mean, so we think wrestling is a lot of work, and it is, but some of the travel schedules of these other sports is a whole nother level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think if you want to be elite in anything, it takes a lot of time and energy and passion and sacrifice out of a lot of people. Obviously, the kids involved, but the parents often sacrifice a lot as well.
Now, just a couple questions for you here as we kind of start to think about bigger picture stuff than wrestling. And so obviously you've had tremendous success in life, in the sport and out of the sport. I mean, anyone would be lucky to be a state champion. Anyone would be lucky to be a doctor if that's what they wanted to do. So I guess the first question for you is, based on what you've seen of kids who are elite high school wrestlers and go to college, what's the difference between kids who make it at the collegiate level and kids who don't make it? And I ask because my homeland, Illinois, I just got to think that we're capable of producing more D1 All-Americans than we are based on Fargo results. So I'm asking kind of selfishly.
Yeah, I thought a lot about that, and I'll give you my take on it. So, and So I think kids, when they first grow up, when they first start wrestling, they're extrinsically motivated, meaning they do it because they like getting a trophy. They do it because they like getting Dippin' Dots. They do it because mom and dad said to do it, right? They work out because they say mom and dad said to do it. They go to practice and they work hard because mom and dad say you better work hard. And eventually, the kids that have success in college, I think, are the kids that can turn in, become from extrinsic motivation, go to intrinsically motivated. And so, so for me, it was always, because this sport is hard, right? It's so hard, especially at college. And to be elite at college, you have to go through some real painful times, and you have to go through, a lot tougher life than most people in college have to go through. And so you better have a true passion. You better be very intrinsically motivated to be amazing. And so for me, I think the kids that struggle are the kids that maybe had the parents that were a little overbearing, and there was still that extrinsic motivation, meaning, hey, Johnny, what practice are you doing tonight? Hey, Johnny, we're doing this tonight. You're not eating, drinking pop. You're not doing this. And everything was very structured for them. Whereas, at least for me, I always wanted to transition my kids once it seemed appropriate, that it had to become their goals, their passion, their desire to be great. And so I think once that transition, the kids that are truly the Yannis of the world and the kids that are able to have success in college are the ones that are intrinsically motivated to be amazing. And the kids that struggle, I think, are the kids that have always had very structured, very extrinsically motivated factors that drive them, right? I need to do this. My dad's going to make me mad at me. I need to do this. My mom's going to be mad at me. I'm doing it because my family thinks I have to do it, right? And so, little long-winded answer, but that's kind of my thoughts on that subject.
Not at all. I mean, and when you talk about that transition with your kids, take for example Drew. Was there a point where you stopped laying out workouts for him, if you did that at all, or was that transition something that happened seamlessly without either of you knowing?
No, it was a conscious decision, and I was far from perfect, right? Each kid's different. My second son was a little more challenging. He wasn't quite sure he loved it as much as Drew did, and my third son. And so for me, I started noticing it. Drew wanted to go do J-Rob, the intensive camp. So I sent my boys, when they were going to be seventh graders, to get their phone, to get a cell phone. They had to finish J-Rob. So they did the 14-day camp. Yeah. And that kind of changed. Yes. So once they finish that, they get a cell phone. So they did that, and then Drew on his own wanted to go back after his first year cadet year. He wanted to go back and do the 28-day, and that kind of was a turning point for him to be extrinsically motivated or intrinsically motivated. He just kind of started doing more and more stuff. I still gave a framework, but he did it. And like his senior year, from October to the state tournament, he on his own did 100 pull-ups every day, 7 days a week, from October to the state tournament finals on his own. He did that all on his own, and I never talked to him about it once. So just an example of just it becoming very important to him and becoming his passion, nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say is a good framework for? It's such a wide-ranging question because there's so many different levels, but once they're, let's say, sixth grade, I think is a turning point where parents say it's okay to specialize, and whether or not that's right or wrong is up for debate. But what is the framework you'd recommend if you have a kid who does love wrestling? Were you doing 2-a-days with them in middle school, 2-a-days with them in high school?
Yeah, great question. So when they were younger, I stopped when we would do the state tournament, the little kids state tournament, and then they would do a dual meet tournament, because I always thought dual meets were real fun for kids. Yeah. And then that would be it. So I would stop them wrestling, and my kids would be done wrestling in April, and they wouldn't wrestle again until November.
No practice? Nothing?
They may do camps. They wouldn't do any regular practices, but they would do some camps in this. I usually had 4 or 5 camps that I would have them go to, but a couple day thing. But there wouldn't be any competition. I think competition really is the hard part for kids. And so then when that turned for me was when they could be like cadets. Okay, so that last schoolboy year, right, the year before they turned into cadets, is when I introduced freestyle to the boys, and that was kind of when they could, and then depending on whether they liked it or didn't, my second son, he loved baseball, so he never did freestyle. But my oldest and my third one and my fourth one, they're just getting at my fourth one is just getting at the age where I'm going to introduce it this year for them. So I was kind of get them good locally. Once they can do locally, go to state. Once they can do good at state, go to regional. Once they can do good at regional, go to national type events, and then kind of avoid the other stuff. And so
I like that though. So up until the last year of schoolboy, no weekly practices, no tournaments outside of April. Okay.
No tournaments, no weekly practices, nothing structured. Now we may do one year we hired a gymnast to come in and during the summer they did one day a week. They would just do tumbling and stuff. And then, or one day they would do, they do like cross training type stuff. Kids love that though. They eat that stuff up. They're having a blast with it and jump rope and they'd have 15 kids or 20 kids out there doing that stuff. So, but yeah, no structured practice at all in the summer, except, just some camps.
What I was going to ask you about, like a weight regime or a body weight, workout routine or anything like that before high school?
In eighth grade, I started introducing the boys to lifting, just more about form, and still do a lot of, basically push-ups, sit-ups, those kind of things, box jumps, and just kind of things with their body weight and such. And then when they get in eighth grade, then I start letting them do not much weight at all, but just getting used to it. So obviously now they have older brothers, they can teach them how to do it, and then they have their own modified weight routine, and then once they get in high school they just share their routines.
Gotcha. And last question for you around the development, because I'm so curious to pick your brain on this. What about weight cutting? Obviously we all hate it, but middle school, are you allowing any weight cutting whatsoever, like that eighth grade year?
Yeah. And but it's all relative, right? And so, I think that there's extremes in everything. So for me, it was like for a big tournament, like, so for the state tournament or for maybe like Super 32, if they wanted to cut some weight. Now, by cutting weight, they were eating 3 meals a day still. Mm-hmm. They were just cutting out the junk food. And usually it would start 2 weeks in advance. They cut out the junk food. They cut out all snacks, and they'd just eat 3 squares a day and increase their activity amount. So if they want to do that, that's what they were able to do.
And back in your day, I'm sure it was just night and day difference, right, from what it is now.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, we did it all along, right? The more sweatshirts, the better. The hotter the room, the better. And the less eating, the better. So it was not very smart.
Now, the last thing I wanted to ask you about, actually, there's 3 quick things. The last thing is always, how did wrestling change your life? So that's coming. What is this barn you have at the compound here? Do you have a full-on wrestling room where the kids practice?
Yeah, so we have it's the barn. It's like it's 72 by 36, I guess it is. And when it first started out, it was the size of 1 mat. And then as my boys grew, I realized 1 mat wasn't enough, so I knocked out about another third of it. So now it's a mat and a third out there, and so we were able to have its perfect size for about 25 kids to practice and have camps and such. That's actually how I met Mike Kolzicki. Called him up, and he was coaching at Michigan, and asked him if he'd come out and work with about 20 kids at the barn. He came out once a week for about 6 weeks and worked on some stuff, and that was the other connection to Michigan. So,
man, how many guys have you just called over the years to do a workout, and next thing you know, you're like lifelong friends with them?
Well, I think, right, wrestling is, again, it changes your lives, right? There's so many great people, right? And so many awesome people. When you're younger, you meet all these great people on your teams that you go do. And then, that's why I love like the junior duels or cadet duels or all the dual tournaments and stuff, because going out to Fargo, because you meet some just amazingly great people that have high aspirations and high expectations. And that usually translates to not only in wrestling, but outside of wrestling. They're so successful and they're so driven. And so that's who you want to hang out with. You want to hang out with people with like-minded goals, and you want your kids to hang out with people that have like-minded goals. And that's why, love being at Michigan. Those kids are all, really serious about academics and really serious about wanting to be national champs.
Yeah, it's hard to go back to hanging out with normal people after you're at the Big Tens all weekend or after you're at the Nationals or Fargo. It's kind of weird to say because you almost judge other people for not being extremists, like some of the people you and I know, but it's a hard thing to get adjusted to going back to non-wrestling people after a big event like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's obviously a high percentage of those people that are elite performers, and so yes.
And then one of your coolest contributions to the sport is this novice state that you started. And I think it's needed everywhere, but give folks a high-level overview of it and how has it grown over the years?
Sure. So again, I ran the youth program in a small town, right? Community-based town. We had 100 kids in the program. And I always said that about 90% of them are truly novice. Okay. Novice by my definition, which is they do a few tournaments. They're brand new to the sport. And Ohio's very fortunate. We have a very tough youth state tournament, the Ohio OAC. They have their junior high state tournament. You should see some of those brackets. They're just insane if you look back at them. And so qualifying for them at a young age, right? Remember we talk about extrinsically motivated kids, right? I want to do it to qualify for state. I want to get on the podium and those kind of things. They need that success at a young age. And that's why that learning curve is so strong. So I had talked about it for about 4 or 5 years. And then I finally pulled the trigger 9 years ago and just said, let's do it. Let's do a novice state tournament. I kind of copied the Oklahoma had a real successful one, kind of copied some of their stuff. And I made it, 3 years or less experience. Could not have ever qualified for the state tournament before. And so basically those are the main two ones. And then those are the criteria. Could never qualify for state, and you had wrestled less than three years or less. And so that first year we had like 200 kids, and then it's just grown and grown and grown. And this year we had to close it off a week out with 865 actually is what we had. And we had to close it a week out. So it's great. I love it.
That's so cool. And it's like, I hope there's more tournaments throughout the year that are novice tournaments as well, because it's just, people talk about wrestling and it's like a badge of honor to go there and get thumped for 3 to 4 years at the youth tournaments. I've done it. I know a lot of people have done it, but it takes a certain kind of kid to come through that because it sucks. Like you get just beat on it. It's not even the same league. So like, are you guys starting to see more novice tournaments throughout the season in addition to the state tournament?
Yeah, you're definitely seeing a lot more of those popping up, and I think they're great. I never believe that. I would never put my kid in a situation where they're going to just be completely overmatched day after day or week after week. I like them to lose, but I want them to be able to be competitive. I think that there's a value in losing. There's very little value in losing, getting pounded week after week after week. That just I just doesn't make sense to me. So I always want to put kids where they need to be, whether that's at the local novice level or the national level, to get challenged.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And it's awesome to hear that you're doing that in such a powerhouse state as Ohio. I mean, you think about a lot of martial arts have that belt system, and you could be a white belt national champion jiu-jitsu. It doesn't mean that you're at the level of a brown belt, but there's still an opportunity for you. And I think that's a cool thing. And hopefully wrestling starts to adopt that. And, the Illinois system, the IKWF is the middle school organization, super, super organized, super competitive. And unless you've been doing it since you were like 6, it's really tough to make those jumps right away. So just think that's awesome. Now, do you do it through the OSA or is it a separate federation or a separate standalone event?
Well, the OAC is, no, it's separate. It's just, we do it on our own. We do it, we're affiliated, meaning we work really close with the OAC. They're great people. They lend me the mats for that. And so we work together very synergistically on that. But we're our own separate unit.
Love it. You just went with it and decided to make it happen.
Yeah.
Hopefully USA Wrestling starts to get behind some of these things. I don't know if there is a way to do that, or if there's an issue of kids sandbagging or not. I hope that's not it, but I'm sure that's always going to be an issue. But has there been any talk of USA Wrestling getting involved with it at some level?
I would love for other states to get in because I think there's a whole, again, I don't think our community is different than any other community. I think most kids by definition are novice. And I think that it'd be great if a bunch of other states did that. And then you could have these like regions and nationals. And again, it's like you talked about the belt level, doing that. If bottom line is if you win the novice state in Ohio, you're going to be a darn good wrestler because it's hard. I mean, it's amazing how tough those little guys are and gals are.
Yeah.
They do. It's pretty impressive. So nothing formally that I've heard of, but I sure do wish. I've been trying to get Jared Lawrence to start it up in Minnesota. So
I think it's a great thing. And I hope, I don't know who would be against such a thing. So I hope we see more of it. And I did just want to thank you for your time during this crazy outbreak we're all living through. For you to take time for this means a lot. And really the last question for you is, how did wrestling change your life? And you've already answered it in a number of ways. But if you had to, outside of the relationships that you forged, I mean, how else has the sport changed your life? Or maybe another way is, if a parent asked you, why would you recommend my kid wrestling? What would you say?
Yeah, I always say that, obviously all the best things in my life came from wrestling, but, for me, why is that? Wrestling teaches you unique lessons. You can do everything right. You can do everything right and work your tail off and live the right life and still not get the success you think you deserve. And so it teaches you to be humble. It teaches you to have desires, and it teaches you to go to push yourself outside your comfort zone. And it also teaches you to handle failure, because I don't know anybody that hasn't ever lost. And so the ability to not reach your goal, to get back up and then work just as hard, if not harder, is why I think it's the best sport out there. And that's why I'm super passionate about trying to expose as many kids there, because I think, kids, we put these self-imposed limitations on what we can be and where we can be, whether it's wrestling, whether it's in life, and I think it's unnecessary. We may not reach our goal, but we can dang sure shoot for the stars and try to get to our goal. And the worst thing that happens is you don't get it, but you're probably higher than where you would have been if you didn't try. So that's kind of what I tell parents, think bigger picture. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And the lessons they learn, it's going to be changed. It's going to change their life at the core level.
And you hit it on the head with the handling failure. I mean, if the worst thing that's ever happened to you in life is that you didn't win the state tournament, you've had a pretty dang good life. But everyone knows that's not the reality, right? I mean, sometime in your mid-20s, maybe you don't get the job you want. Maybe you lose a girlfriend. Maybe even it's not in your 20s. Maybe it's your 30s, and you lose a parent. Like, something's going to happen that's a real travesty in life. And the training you've gone through wrestling indirectly should help you cope with that in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to get knocked to your core eventually. And, the ability to not just fold and call it quits, and just stand up and be not afraid to say what you want and go after it and get it, because, you can outwork a lot of people. It's pretty easy to. Most people aren't wired the way wrestlers are wired. And if they're willing to put the time and energy into whatever their goal is, they can get it done.
Yeah, you can get really far just on that alone. You're exactly right.
Correct.
Well, sir, it's been an honor. I greatly appreciate the time. Wish you and your family stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to meet at one of these tournaments here once things get back to normal.
Yeah, well, maybe you can come out to Hammer Camp, check it out.
I'd love it, man. I'd love it. That'd be a hotbed of interviews.
Yeah, it's Zeb Miller comes out and covers that, and he interviews a ton of good kids there. So it's a fun weekend.
I would love to come out.
All right, great.
We'll talk to you soon. Take care. And all great things must come to an end. If you want to hear more from the podcast, text WRESTLE to 555-888. That's WRESTLE to 555-888. You can also find us on Instagram, Wrestling Changed My Life, Twitter, Ryan_N_Warner, as well as our website, WrestlingChangeMyLife.com. Take care, y'all. Calm. 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 Take care, y'all.